Hello again, everybody, and welcome to this very special week's edition. I wouldn't say it's Freeform Friday, but I call it Freeform Wednesday, my dudes and dudettes. And Alan has entered the studio, so I'm adding him to the stage. What is going on, sir? How are you?
Well, David, we're enjoying an auspicious August, and Freeform Friday heeds the call. But just be careful if you're a wrestler and you tugboat tumble through a papier-mâché wrestling wall.
Choo-choo!
You got it, sir.
All right. So we got a lot of topics that we're going to get into. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I could talk about as far as modern wrestling is concerned, like Chris Jericho looking like he's going to re-sign with the WWE. All things are possible. Rumor and innuendo has it that Triple H doesn't want him back when his contract ends in December of this year. Maybe he'll make a Royal Rumble appearance.
Well, those two had some heat in the past, I remember.
Yes, but I know it's been played down and it's been cooled down ever since, because the thing is, Triple H has said, well, you came into this company and you had so much buzz, there was so much hype about you, and blah, 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 and we were all jealous of you because at the time we were all trying to be the top stars. Is there heat to this day? Is there a problem? I don't think so. I don't think so.
Wasn't Triple H even more of a top star, arguably, than Jericho was after a little while?
Well, Chris Jericho debuted in 1999, right?
Right.
And he was presented as this larger-than-life persona, and the presentation, I think, rubbed a lot of the talent the wrong way. However, the whole thing in State College in 2000, that was another total, I don't want to say clusterfuck, but
I don't know what you're referring to.
There was a whole thing on a Monday Night Raw in State College back in April 2000. I don't remember the exact date. Some of you in chat, you'll probably educate us on said event. So Chris Jericho takes the microphone and says, oh, why don't you make this match for the World Wrestling Federation title? Because this was at the time Triple H was the champion. Mm-hmm. And Chris Jericho would win said title due to a fast count from Earl Hebner. But of course, later on that evening, the decision would be reversed.
Okay. Interesting.
However, it's just the crowd reaction is really what got to me and still gets to me over 25 years later. And the fans popped, and they always pop when a fresh face gets over a champion.
Sure. Definitely true, but fast forwarding to the present, how old is Chris Jericho now?
I think he's 50, 54, 55. He was born in 1970, or maybe born
Yeah, that sounds about right. So, I mean, oh boy, wow. I mean, look, he debuted in 1991, so, or somewhere around there in the late 80s, very late 80s. So he's maybe just a year or two behind Dustin Rhodes. So I guess, well, I don't know why I mean, I guess it's a get if he gets there. I mean, because of his long association with the other side there. So maybe it's, no, I guess it's newsworthy, I suppose.
But as far as I'm concerned, it would be the unlimited amount of programs Chris Jericho could have with said over talent, such as Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, even though he's had a program with him back in,
Yeah, 10
you
years
know,
ago.
back in the late mid to late 2010s. But Seth Rollins, John Cena, probably not because he's allegedly retiring. But Roman Reigns,
He could
the
still
list
go.
goes on and on.
He could still go, Jericho.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I haven't been paying attention in years, so I mean, unless he makes the news, then I might pay attention to the news. But I don't watch these products much, especially AEW at all, really. So I don't know.
Well, yeah, and we're going live right now as AEW Dynamite's about to commence
No,
momentarily in about 30 minutes from now as we speak, but AEW's audience is dwindling and dwindling and dwindling.
well, I wonder why. I mean, all the top stars who made it special are either barely there or went to the competition, or so the buzz has severely diminished as the buzz is back on the other side again, where it wasn't maybe 6 years ago, but now it is. Well, look, it's like anything else. That's any other promotion from the past that looked like it was going to be the next big thing, and they do have a massive budget, but I mean they're nowhere near WWE in their scope, and they're even if they've done in some international shows. I mean they're clearly number two by a long shot. So now, if they're satisfied with that, that's fine. But I'd be sad if they try to delude themselves into believing they're number one. But
Oh no, they certainly ain't number one.
no, look, we've come a long way from the Monday Night Wars and all that stuff, and there's no war. I mean, it's a snooze of a conflict at best. And I'll never forget how Tony Khan actually put down Ted Turner. He had the nerve to
Oh yeah,
basically.
how much so?
How much did he put him down?
Well, I'm just curious. This is news to me. How did Tony Khan put a multi-billionaire media mogul down?
Well, by talking, I can't remember the exact content of what he said, but it had something to do with um, being a bad wrestling promoter and how Khan's going to be better or something along that line. And yet Tony Khan's show is on the one of the networks that Ted Turner founded, so it was really outrageous. And Ted Turner has accomplished so many incredible things in all of media, not just wrestling, of course. That I mean, I don't know what Tony Khan is. Little too many energy drinks there for Mr. Khan. I don't know what the hell
Or
he's thinking.
too much of other things that maybe we can't
Yeah,
disclose
yeah,
because we don't
possible.
know it for a fact, but we know it's true.
I guess. So hopefully, whatever it is, it's pure stuff for him. I guess. So I don't know. I mean, I don't care. Like, I mean, he doesn't mean anything to me personally because he's at least 20 years after it mattered to me. So I just don't, whatever. But it's just really an incredible amount of gall that's actually appropriate for the wrestling business where you're supposed to be arrogant and braggadocious, but he's not a wrestler and he's not a wrestling manager. He's the head of the company, so it's not the most becoming thing he could do, but then again, I guess it creates buzz and news, and all the social media hacks are excited about whenever he gives a quotable soundbite. So perhaps that matters more now than how good a wrestler is on the microphone or a manager, if there is one. There's no real managers anymore.
No, exactly. No real managers anymore. So let's pivot. Let's pivot to uh, the good old days that you wanted to talk about because there's quite a lot of topics you wanted to discuss. How do you wish to begin? Because you sent me a list of things that you wanted to talk about, and believe you me, there's quite a lot.
Well,
And
they're not even very long topics, some of them, but they are worth expanding upon. I mean, Yeah, I mean, I'd like to start with the Montreal stuff, which is, here we are in Montreal. So let's look a little bit back at Montreal old school wrestling history,
All
if
right.
that's all right. So I'm going a little bit from memory here, but we rewind to this past week, August 16th, a few days ago, 34 years ago. Montreal Forum, World Wrestling Federation house show, because we didn't have pay-per-views here. We didn't. They were a lot fewer and far between. Couldn't get a television taping here for the life of us in those days. So basically, house shows, which used to happen about 12 times a year for the federation, but by this point they had been reduced to about 4 or 5, and um, you're lucky. We're lucky to get that. But the business was really falling at this time, because this is the time when Ric Flair was coming into the WWF, and he had his big falling out with Jim Herd, and it just collapsed a lot of WCW. So WWF fans were excited about that. Maybe some NWA, WCW fans were too. But the house show business wasn't really great. This is the period where the Hulk Hogan Sergeant Slaughter feud, and where Slaughter portrayed the very controversial Iraqi sympathizer. The feud was about to die down at SummerSlam, which would be 10 days after this. And I don't think they did boffo business at house shows, because I didn't even think, like, to me, Slaughter was not a credible threat to Hogan once he won the belt at WrestleMania the first time out. So Slaughter was a descending character, and it was so bad that, of course, he groveled to get his country back not long after this. So basically, he became a low-level babyface, and then a tag team wrestler, and then, of course, an agent, which he remained for many years. Now, this show didn't have Hogan or Slaughter, but you had the other circuit. At this point, you had 2 house shows a night often, and big markets, sometimes a big and a small market. And this touring circuit was headlined by The Undertaker versus The Ultimate Warrior, which was a super hot feud. I mean, Undertaker was still relatively new. The Warrior was super established, but he'd only have 10 more days in the company left. Nobody knew it at this Forum house show, but of course he would create a real controversy at SummerSlam 91 in 10 days from this house show. But at this point, The Undertaker and Warrior had already had their regular matches around the Horn, and now they were doing the circuit in a series of body bag matches, which before ECW was a thing, this was a pretty extreme concept, this idea that somebody would be zipped up in a body bag to lose a match. And that's the only way you could win, is by zipping your opponents in a body bag. It sounded really sinister. It was only a few months before on television where the Warrior was thought to have nearly suffocated to death in the casket on the funeral parlor. Do you remember that segment where the Warrior was
Yeah,
locked?
where the Warrior was stuffed in the casket and they had to get him out.
Yeah, it was done really very well done. This time they didn't normally do angles that scary. I mean, on the other channel, they forced Terry Funk out of his active career because he put a plastic bag over Ric Flair's head in the fall of 1989 at Clash of the Champions 8. And even though the booker was okay with it and the participants were okay, including Flair, TBS executives didn't like this. And next thing you know, Funk has to forcibly retire 2 months later and become a TV commentator, color commentator, which was not his wish at the time. He did not want to retire. He was having the hottest run of his career practically, other than the mid 70s. So extreme angles were definitely not allowed on TBS. And this was the syndicated WWF network of shows. And before Monday Night Raw, before any of that. But this was a pretty extreme angle to do that casket sealing thing, and they really made a big deal out of it. If you remember, they took many minutes to get him out, and they had to saw the lock off, I think, and do all this stuff. So now they were going to get pretty serious and have body bag matches. And I remember being very, very excited about this, because I was also a little mortified, pardon the pun, but I was a little taken aback at this idea that I never have ever heard of such a thing in wrestling, where the idea of zipping, and it sounds silly by today's standards, but because things have gotten so much more extreme over the years. But that was pretty extreme at that point. That was a pretty hardcore match stipulation. So the forum was a buzz, but only little over 6,000 people showed up to see it. But then again, that's not so bad because they've had lower than that. So a big far cry from the late 80s when 15, 20,000 people would show up every 4 weeks sometimes for World Wrestling Federation house shows, and when the business was really on fire, So anyway, well, needless to say, the Warrior emerged victorious, which was a huge thing, and it was quite a sight to see. And Paul Bearer, I think, the manager, of course, of the Undertaker, unzipped. I was worried, and he unzipped Undertaker after the match, and I think Undertaker may have done his stiff, like sitting up routine, but still a very entertaining main event without a Hulk Hogan, without a Randy Savage, without uh, even DiBiase or anybody. Like they put on like the match wasn't a technical classic, of course, given the Warrior was in it, and Undertaker was still not green, but he was still finding his footing in the Federation, and it was still his first full year of competition there, and a very entertaining main event, and whoever was there, I think, probably enjoyed it. As for the rest of the card, well, you were given a few interesting matches, as I recall. I mean, you have the list maybe in front of you. I know that Tito Santana went against Hercules. This is right before Santana, Tito
Okay.
Santana.
Let's see. So we talked about the body back match. So on the road to SummerSlam 91 with a mere 6,100 fans in attendance, you had Coco Beware pinning the Brooklyn Brawler. You had Greg Valentine defeating Colonel Mustafa, the Elite Gret Iron Sheik. The Natural Disasters defeating the Bushwhackers with Andre the Giant, and yes, Tito Santana would defeat Hercules. As well as other results, you had the Big Boss Man pinning the Mountie with a roll up as Mountie was arguing with guest referee Dino Bravo, or the late Dino Bravo, after the belt. And the Natural Disasters would come out to confront Bravo until Boss Man made the save with the nightstick, and you had IRS and Ted DiBiase with Sensational Sherry defeating Bret Hart and Virgil. Now, this is before the branding of Money Incorporated. And in all caps, as you sent me, the Ultimate Warrior would defeat would defeat the Undertaker with Paul Bearer in a body bag match. Oh no! But I do remember one person that was actually there at said house show.
Mm-hmm.
And he remember this guy, his name is Nick Guerin. And by the way, if you're a metal band and if you want to get together and you want them to promote you, go to Dungeon Works. I'll just give you so I can fully detail how you can market yourself and get in touch with one Nick Guerin.
Was Nick Guerin a member of the Dungeon of Doom as well?
So, I don't think so.
Okay. Well, good then.
I don't think so. So here's the thing. Go to one thing I can give you is facebook.com/dungeonworksprods. I can most definitely give you that. So Nick Guerin has had the likes of promoting Chris Holmes and will be bringing back Chris Holmes eventually later this year for his own tour or for his own right, as he will be performing the music of Wasp.
It's great that he's still alive after his 80s.
So if you are looking to get in touch with one Nick Guerin, reach out to him at dungeonworksmtl@gmail.com. And also, please be sure to visit the Facebook page at facebook.com/dungeonworksprods.
Oh, cool. Well, that's
He's
the
always
Tahitian man
booking
too.
local and up and coming metal bands. So that's and okay. So for further clarity, because my explanation sounded so vague. So on the 20th of September, which is a Saturday at 8 p.m., Chris Holmes, the Sound of Wasp, with Thunderer Exorcist and Stregoneria and the Struggle's Over, but that's going to be in Kingston. However, there will be a Montreal date.
Yeah, you got me excited. I thought you were going to say it was Strike Force for a minute.
No Strike Force. No Strike
They're,
Force.
They're busy with girls and cars this summer.
Or they're busy in real estate.
Yeah, not Tito though. Rick might be. Rick probably is. Left Tito's in real estate too. Arriba.
Arriba. Don't even get me started on that. All right, so that's the Kingston, Ontario date for those of you living in Kingston. However, there will be many other dates, and I do believe there will be one coming up in Montreal. And as soon as I clarify this, I don't want to stress myself too much onto it, but I will be sure to let you all know should you want to see Chris Holmes from Wasp. Or I can just do a quick Google search and just tell you this. And it would be so simple, just like October 5th, or just like in October, early October, McFoley's going to be making an appearance at the Cafe Cleopatra Strip Club to do his own comedy act, and he will also be appearing at the Yuck Yucks Comedy Club here. Well, not here. I don't live here, but over in Ottawa.
Is Mick going to be removing his clothing like Midian used to?
I sure hope not.
Right.
I sure hope not.
That's an interesting venue for.
Well, I'm sure. Well, Walter J. Ling is the guy that is the guy. Walter J. Ling is the guy that's going to be bringing him in. So it looks like it's going to be September 25th that Chris Holmes is going to be in Montreal, as per Facebook, which is also brought to you by Eric Brunet, who I also remember as a former lead singer and a former band member.
Of what?
So, of a band which was known as Foreshadow. So, September 25th. All right. Let me explain all the tour dates. So, the 24th, Chris will be in Quebec City at Les Sources de la Maritinière. And the 25th of September, Chris will be performing at the Piranha Bar in downtown Montreal. And the Brass Monkey, the 26th of September in Ottawa. And the Rock Pile in Toronto. So, for those of you that want to go to the show, please get your tickets now. And believe you me, I love me some Chris Holmes. And he doesn't get enough respect when it comes to, the band Wasp. Blackie Lawless gets most of the credit and most of the respect, but Chris Holmes deserves most, if not all, of the credit because he co-wrote and he played a lot of the songs that most fans remember.
Yeah. Well, how did you know Nick was at the show I was talking about at the forum? Like, why that show? Like, what's
Because he told me, because he used to be a wrestling fan. He used to be a wrestling fan, and back in the day when we were close with one another, not that we're not close
yeah,
anymore, we
yeah,
still are. We
yeah, yeah.
still are, but not in the same way. I mean, the guy's gotten married and he's got his own business and he's got a lot of stuff going on in his life. But, we used to randomly talk wrestling. And he said, "Oh, yeah, I remember attending the Montreal Forum show when it was the Ultimate Warrior and the Undertaker in the series of body bag matches." I'm like, "Well, who went over? Was it Undertaker or was it Ultimate Warrior?"
Wow. Yeah. Unfortunately, Warrior had the seniority big time then, and if what had happened 10 days from that point didn't happen, who knows what it could have been? But of course, he came back at WrestleMania 8, and then he came back at WrestleMania 12, and then, of course, the last time for the Hall of Fame. But yeah, totally. So you were saying earlier that apparently Colonel Mustafa was humbled by Greg the Hammer Valentine, right? The babyface Greg Valentine.
Oh, the Iron Shaker, the Colonel Mustafa. What the fuck you give me that for, Vince McMahon? I know I owe you money, you fucking son of a bitch. I have to be humbled. I have to be fucked in the asshole.
By Greg the Hammer Valentine, no less.
Gregor the Hammered Valentine, he don't know nothing when it become the Sheik. The
No.
Sheik, he hammered, he drugged, and you hammered Greg the Hammer Valentine, you son of a bitch.
Well, Valentine was not enjoying his babyface run here, and it would be short lived at this point. This was a few months after he reluctantly did the job to Earthquake at WrestleMania 7, which he complained endlessly about for years after, and was a little less than kind when talking about the late, great John Tenta, who was an extremely nice person from all reports. I mean, so Valentine was a little bitter there, but, a paycheck's a paycheck, I guess. And Mustafa found that out on this night, too. The Tito Santana Hercules match is interesting because Tito Santana was on the verge of becoming El Matador, the ill-fated.
No, you have to say it the right way. El Matador.
I stand corrected. Thank you, David. Thank you for that nice trip to Tacula, Mexico, or Spain.
Arriba, ole!
There you go. And and Hercules was basically coming off the downswing of breaking up Power and Glory with Paul Roma, and in a few he would stick around for another 6 to 7, 8 months and have that infamous sit-up incident at Madison Square Garden. I think we've talked about that, with Sid Justice and Hercules.
Yeah, the no selling incident. Yes, we discussed that. Um, we've discussed it, if my memory serves me right, multiple times, because I know we might have talked about it when we did our Sid Udi tribute episode, but also when we were talking about a specific timeline. So we may have discussed this
Yeah,
more often than not.
possibly. Now, I think Hercules is worthy of mention also because he's really an unheralded superstar of the real golden era there, and it's, some people call it the Federation years, the Rock and Wrestling Connection might even be better. And he doesn't get the adulation that he really deserves, and not only for his WWF run, which granted the last couple of years was not so stellar in a lot of ways, but I mean his great work in Mid South before that, and other places he'd been, and then after he left the WWF, it was kind of never the same. But he did do very well in Japan. He was one half of the Jurassic Powers, I believe, if I remember correctly, and which was a big New Japan tag team at the time. And was that with Scott Norton? I'm trying to remember. And also, of course, he was the Super Invader, managed by former Bobby Heenan family stablemate Harley Race in WCW in '92, around the period where Ron Simmons became world champion. And he made appearances in the ill-fated AWF, which I've talked about a few times. You said you don't remember the AWF, actually, but this was like Sergeant
I
Slaughter and
absolutely do not.
no. It was a promotion that was run, I think, by Paul Alperstein, and he had Tito Santana and Sergeant Slaughter, I believe, doing a
Right.
lot of the booking. And they got themselves a national time slot. And this was right as the Monday Night Wars were really beginning, and it only lasted a short period of time. But they had a lot of big names, and it was the last place that I can remember Tom Zink appearing. And but they had a lot of big names. Valentine, who we mentioned before, was there, and they had good names, but it was what it was, I guess. And the wrestling wars were people were too focused on Monday nights, I'm guessing, at that point, and things were getting hot again, so or starting to in certain ways. So that was that. But back to the Forum show, yeah, this was the last appearance in Montreal of Andre the Giant. The final appearance at a WWF show. He was on crutches. He wasn't doing that great in that respect, but the feud with Earthquake never really happened as it was supposed to. You may remember that they were positioning Andre in a feud with Earthquake, but Andre was not physically well enough to do it. So they made him a corner man, and he would attack the natural disasters whenever he could, with Jake the Snake Roberts, his old foe, seconding Jake. Some European dates. He would second the Bushwhackers, as he did here. The Bushwhackers Natural Disasters match was like a rehearsal for SummerSlam, because they would do it again
Right.
10 days from there. And yeah, so I mean, oh yeah, and of course, how can we forget? Bossman Mountie was another rehearsal match for the Jailhouse match that was going to happen at SummerSlam, the very famous one. And it was nice to see Dino Bravo, who had basically returned as a babyface at this point to Montreal, and a few months later, 6 months later, almost 4 months later, five, would have his retirement match, which I mentioned before, the day after the Royal Rumble here in Montreal. And outside of Montreal, it was not a huge deal, but Montreal fans were happy to see Dino back having dark hair again. He took the blonde dye out of his hair, and he was a baby face again. And no sign of Jimmy Hart or Luscious Johnny V or Valentine or all these people that helped make him a heel. And he was a low-key babyface at this point. So,
No, none whatsoever. None
yeah,
whatsoever.
yeah,
All right. I think our next subject, now that
yep,
we've gotten that out of the way, we were going to discuss what went down on August the 18th, as this is the 32nd anniversary of WCW's Clash of the Champions 23 in Daytona Beach, Florida, which would end up drawing 8,903 fans to the Ocean Center. Of
24.
course,
Classic.
8,903 as per the notes you left me.
Yeah, yeah. Clash of the Champions 24, though, not 23. And
Well, as per the Roman numerals that you left me, it's 23.
is
But
it? Sorry about
yeah,
that.
you sent me to you said 23 in your notes, so I'm not wrong. I'm not saying nobody's wrong, but I'm just saying those are the notes you left me.
It could have been me. No, it must have been me then. Sorry about that.
No
Yeah.
problem.
So yeah.
But
So
I have to get this in, even though people don't like me imitating and getting myself over.
oh, it's
But
great. No, go
we'll
ahead.
talk all about it. And this, of course, this would be the ultimate show. And I mean the ultimate of ultimate shows, where the Shockmaster made his infamous debut during Flair for the Gold, where Fred Ottman sadly would trip and fall. His helmet would fall off, and he'd put it back on. And then you would have the Ole Anderson voice of, "They call me the Shockmaster." Master, so you're the man that rules the world, Sid. Among other things.
Yeah, well, Sid would have to. Well, even Sid wouldn't rule the world for much longer, as he'd be fired a few months after this too.
Oh
Not
yeah,
that.
he would crap his pants allegedly, but we're not going to speak ill of the dead. Did he or did he not crap his pants? That remains to be seen.
Well, that does remain to be seen if we can ever see it. But one thing that does not remain to be seen is that Sid was a bit of a risky hire on many levels, and WCW tried again after, of course, allowing him to leave the first time after his infamous stretcher match with El Gigante at Super Brawl 1, so he could become Sid Justice in the WWF. Was promised all kinds of things. Obviously, things didn't go his way. Softball season was underway, and out went Sid. So, but Sid was brought back in May at Slamboree with Colonel Parker as his manager, the great Robert Fuller, who I believe we talked about last time with Continental Wrestling, the Fuller family. And Sid was, he was being groomed for a big world title match with Vader at Starrcade. So they were working their way there. As for the Shockmaster, well, we were just talking about the natural disasters. Well, this was some disaster on national television that to this day remains one of the most classic highlight moments of the blooper reel, shall we say, of those who love to see people mess up, and was supposed to be ultra serious. But honestly, Shockmaster's helmet didn't look very, even if it had stayed on, I mean, it looked really amateurish. It was,
Well,
uh-oh.
we're talking about the Shockmaster. Why don't I just show you a little something here, ladies and
Oh my
gentlemen?
goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, David Buchanan has taken a piece of the Shockmaster, it looks like, or a piece of the wall that's,
Well, it's not the
oh,
piece of the wall,
oh,
but
that's
no, this was autographed and personalized to me last year from Fred Ottman because this is an amazing thing from our good friends at WCA Wrestling Collectible Auctions. Of course, our good friends Martin Villeneuve and Stéphane Gauthier.
yes.
And they took a bunch of stormtrooper helmets. They painted it silver. I even have. I still what's have left. I still what is left of the spray can in case the helmet needs a touch up. But it's looking pretty good a year from now,
That's pretty
or
amazing.
a year from the time I attained it.
Right. So you didn't fall through a wall with it. So that's good.
No, I've fallen through a lot of things, but a wall, no, that remains to be seen.
No, that's true. And we have to remember that Dusty Rhodes was booking the Clash of the Champions at this time and other WCW programming, his own form of geniusing, if you will. But
Oh yeah, the American Dream Death the Road. He was booking all the WCW programming, and he was geniusing. He was geniusing, baby. Do I need to take a pen and write it out for you, everybody? I will do it if I have to. I'll do it right now. I got my pen. I don't know if it's gonna run out of ink, baby. But worst case scenario, I go scream to JJ Dillon to go get me another pen. Hey JJ, go get me a pen. I would go get it myself, but I'm going live and I'm so busy geniusing. Hold on.
well, he's an American dream, folks. And he's
Well,
the
yeah,
common.
geniusing. Here we go, geniusing.
I can't see it. Go higher, higher, higher. Put it higher. Oh,
Hold
the
on.
feed.
Oh, wrong way.
Ah,
Yeah,
well,
geniusing.
very good, Dusty. It's your booking was.
Geniusing. Oh, ABG. ABG, baby. Always be geniusing
With your bionic elbow.
with my bionic elbow, baby. I put it over there. Okay, Like right is left, left is right here, baby. ABG, baby. Always
Yep.
be genius them.
You want to tell us what was in Baby Doll's envelope now?
That's confidential, baby. That's confidential. I don't tell you what's in Baby Doll's envelope. And Baby Doll won't even tell you, Daddy. She ain't
No,
telling you nothing.
no, she won't. Diddly squat for sure. But tell me, were you geniusing when you put together Rick Rude and the Equalizer to go against?
Well, now I'm gonna return back to myself and not talk like Dusty Rhodes because I don't know what was going through the mind of Dusty Rhodes when it came to booking the Equalizer and Rick Rude.
Yeah,
I
who were they
mean,
against? It was Dustin Rhodes and Hawk, or was it Dustin Rhodes and was it
uh,
Road?
well, we'll have to go back to what your notes say because as far as your notes go, we started with the Shockmaster, and then we got into, as per, I don't know if this is in chronological order. It's been an extremely long time since I've watched this Clash of the Champions. So,
Yeah.
starters, you have Arn Anderson, Paul Roma, and Paul Roma being part of the Four Horsemen. I'm not going to say anything bad about Paul Roma because I don't want him to kick my ass when it comes to September 20th at Slamfest, which he is going to be at. And I want to be on his best side, and hopefully we can collaborate and work together. Of course, Arn and Paul would go on to defeat Lord Steven Regal and Steve Austin with Brian Pillman and Sir William to win the NWA WCW Unified World Tag Team titles. And
Well,
then
this
you would
is
have,
let's stop for here for a minute. Now, this is a
sure,
this is a very interesting story because Lord Steven Regal was not half of the World Tag Team Unified Tag Team Champions, but Brian Pillman had injured his leg and came out and announced that there would be a substitution basically at the beginning of the show because this was the period where Flying Brian and Stunning Steve were known as the Hollywood Blondes, the hottest tag team by far in WCW for quite a long time. Obviously, we know what would go on in Steve Austin's career a couple years after this. But Austin and Pillman were not able to team this night because of Pillman's injury. So Austin wound up teaming with, of all people, Lord Steven Regal, and they wound up losing the belts. They'd never teamed before, really. So the Horsemen got the titles, Anderson and Roma. And Regal was really, this was a great period for Regal, I found. This was his first full year in WCW, and his work was just impeccable, not only in the ring, but his character work was great. And I was a big enthusiast of Lord Steven Regal. Of course, he had superstar Bill Dundee, booking committee member William Crookshanks, the infamous Bill Dundee from Memphis Wrestling, as Sir William, the umbrella carrying butler or servant to Lord Steven, and he wasn't above using the umbrella to interfere in matches when when need be as well. So.
oh, it was a lethal weapon, let me tell you that.
Yeah, well, that's right, because it was always raining men around there, so they had to do something.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, indeed. So yeah, so Regal lost the belts for the Hollywood Blondes along with Austin, and Arn and Paul would go on to be champions for a short time before the Nasty Boys, I believe, would take it to them.
Yes. And then we would go to Too Cold Scorpio defeating Bobby Eaton, Johnny B. Bad defeating Max Payne, and Ricky Steamboat defeating Paul Roma to win the WCW World TV Championship. And then
Did
you
I
would
write
go
Paul
to,
Roma? Did I write Paul Roma? That was an error.
yeah, you did.
Sorry, it's Paul Orndorff, actually. It's Paul Mr. Wonderful Orndorff.
No, it's
Who,
Ricky Steamboat versus Paul Orndorff. Yeah,
yeah.
I said Orndorff. Not
No,
Paul
you said,
Roma. We were talking about the tag team championship.
yeah, but you accidentally said Roma now, unless I'm completely out of my mind unless I've gone where Damien Demento is right now. So,
Well, or you've managed to be just as bad as I am.
Oh, I'm not sure, but I do want to say something about these matches.
Sure.
Scorpio was, yeah, thank you. Scorpio was kind of a sad throwaway match here. Bobby Eaton, one of the best wrestlers of his generation, easily. Often talk about unsung heroes, but Bobby Eaton was just fodder here, kind of. And although he did put up some good offense, but Bobby Eaton was just floating around as a singles wrestler at this time. You may remember he briefly had a tag team with Chris Benoit in WCW, which was
Yes.
quite something. But as a singles wrestler, he was just, one level above enhancement talent. The Pain versus Johnny B. Bad match was infamously interesting because Max Payne hadn't yet teamed up with Mick Foley, the Cactus Jack character, and they basically were feuding. They had the mask versus the guitar match, and the reason Johnny B. Bad was wearing a mask is because Payne had taken his Bad Blaster and blew the confetti gun in his face, causing facial damage to the very pretty face of Mark Marrow, aka Johnny B. Bad. And so Marrow put up his mask, and he was willing to put up his mask if Max Payne would put up Norma Jean, his beloved guitar. Of course, Payne would go on to be Man Mountain Rock in the World Wrestling Federation. And this was what it was, which was crap. It's too bad, but
And he still continues to threaten to release that home video that he filmed during the European tour of 1995.
yeah. Well, 30 years later, I don't know how much damage it could really do except to make him look bad at this point. But anyway, whatever. But
Well,
I
it
get,
tells you a lot about him as opposed to the people involved.
yeah, I mean, I don't think whoever is left around, they just probably don't care. I mean, most of them anyway. So a little late now, right? 3 decades later. So,
Oh,
but
yeah.
anyway, yeah, that's it. Steamboat versus Orndorff, well, two all-time greats there, but at this point in their career, Orndorff was, soon going to be moved into tag teams with Roma, and he was not exactly as wonderful in the ring as he used to be, but still obviously a very powerful presence. And Steamboat is Steamboat, but Steamboat here was coming off of his tag team run with Shane Douglas. Shane had left the company, of course, and would soon join this company called Eastern Championship Wrestling, as you may have heard of. Soon to be Extreme, but yeah, these matches were, kind of throwaway. Even though there was a TV title change, it's not exactly super memorable. But continue.
All right. So, other than that, we're moving on to God. I can't believe I'm reading this, and I've seen this, but luckily, due to numerous copious years of drinking, I have completely forgotten about this till I have just read this because this actually happened. You had Ric Flair and Sting defeating the Colossal Kongs, accompanied by Harley Race.
Yeah, pretty
What
bad,
a
pretty
throw-
bad.
what a
Hmm?
throwaway.
Yeah, to waste Ric Flair and Sting in a 2 minute match just because Flair is a baby face, and it must have been the thrill of seeing Flair and Sting on the same side for once instead of enemies. And but look what they did with them. They just put them in there with a lumbering 1,000-pound tag team, and who were not very coordinated and were easy fodders. And I don't even if there was a point to it, unless. I mean, Ric Flair on the previous Clash of Champions had teamed with Arn Anderson against Pillman and Austin, which was a fleshed out 2 out of 3 fall match, if memory serves me. And this is what Ric Flair's doing here. And soon he would wind up in the feud with Ravishing Rick Rude over the, what do you call it, the international title, the baloney NWA belt there.
Well, it's the NWA World Heavyweight title, but they have to re-verbiage or re-represent what this title represents to try to get away from the oh so ancient relic from the crypt NWA lineage. Excuse us.
Well, it didn't help because honestly, as meaningless as the belt was before they took away the NWA, they withdrew from the NWA itself, meaning they couldn't use the name anymore. But this belt was pointless because why do you need an international or NWA world champion? You had the Mastodon Vader as the WCW world champion. What do you need a secondary world title for? That just makes you look, amateurish and waters it down.
Well, at this point, I would bust out my own world heavyweight title, but this world heavyweight title that I owned and still own has traveled many miles. It's recently been signed by none other than, of course, you were there when Rugged Ronnie Garvin signed it over at the Leonardo da Vinci Center last year. And it's also recently been inaugurated by Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, as well as my Intercontinental Championship. And I am also looking to get those signatures or said belts inaugurated by none other than Bret the Hitman Hart.
Hmm. Wow, that's something. Inaugurated? You mean like autographed?
Yeah, well, when I say autograph, we say autograph, I say inauguration. I say take the belt and sign it, inaugurate it, make it worth something,
Ah,
make it good, or say something you wouldn't normally say in an autograph session.
wow, that's a good approach for sure. So, speaking of the international champion, Rick Rude is in the aforementioned terrible tag team with the Equalizer, who would go on to
Yes,
be
and it would
the
be Dustin Rhodes and Road Warrior Hawk, the late Mike Hegstrand.
right. And the Equalizer, of course, would go on to become Dave Sullivan or Evad Sullivan, if you prefer.
Evad Irving, as Jesse the Body Ventura would say. No, no, he's Evad Irving Sullivan.
Oh yeah, how memorable! Unfortunately, so I mean, Hawk here was going at it alone. Him and Animal were not together in WCW at this point, and Hawk, of course, had his unceremonious dumping from the WWF. I don't know if it's because Animal was collecting a Lloyd's of London back insurance policy or what it was, because Animal had already been gone from the WWF as of October of 1992. I don't remember what Animal was even doing in 93, but Hawk came in as a singles competitor. He was also on the independent circuit as a singles competitor as Dustin Rhodes' partner. Well, kind of forgettable, but it's pretty understandable. Rude and Equalizer, I'd like to forget because it's like you have Grace and hardcore talent, and then you have the Equalizer, which no disparaging the Equalizer. I mean, he was pretty okay in Portland wrestling from whence he came, but I wouldn't say he lit WCW rings on fire or anything. But and I, to say the
Did
least,
not. He
no.
didn't.
I think they actually gave him that horrendous match with that also did live in infamy for a while with Jungle Jim Steele at Spring Stampede or Super Brawl. The Super Brawl, I think, the next year, where he was still the Equalizer, and they gave him the one of the worst, gimmick guys who would go on to actually be somewhat pretty decent. But yeah, Jungle Jim Steele, another forgotten name in the annals of WCW. So their own answer to Tarzan. But we move on to the main event of the Clash of the Champions, I believe.
Oh, yes. Big Van Vader, the late great Leon White, would also defeat the late great Davey Boy Smith in a title can change hands via disqualification match. Of course, Vader would win the title and retain the heavyweight championship. And this
Yeah.
was at the time when uh, Davey Boy was out of the WWF and was in WCW, and he could have had a much more successful run than what exactly went down during this evening. Um,
Well,
what say you?
Well, he had a great match with Vader. I mean, this is the second. This was kind of the rematch because they battled each other at Slamboree in May, and they went on to fight each other. That was, I believe, in Atlanta, and then they fought each other here. And this would be Davey Boy's last significant world title match at this point. And well, Vader was on an unstoppable reign, and Davey Boy was so good in the ring. I mean, they had excellent matches together, but it would have been hard to believe that they would have made Davey world champion. The main reason that Davey was even there, I think, aside from him being available, was that they wanted to pump up the European market for European tours. And
Yes.
there was a big controversy because Davey was not given the money he was promised for touring Europe under the initial agreement. His contract stated that he would be paid a lot more to main event the European shows than his regular salary, but that didn't happen. They just gave him his regular American salary, as I recall. So Davey Boy was really miffed, and whatever happened happened. And of course, he would leave. And in Starrcade, by Starrcade, he already had to be replaced by the aforementioned Ray Traylor, the boss, the big boss man at that time. And the Davey Boy versus Vader was a great match, just like it was at Slamboree. It was by far the best match of the Clash of the Champions. Wasn't even a contest in that respect. But Davey Boy could not pierce whatever glass ceiling was there. And Vader was on such an amazing run in '93. You couldn't expect, it was going to take somebody. Well, they were grooming him for Sid, but Sid went and got himself fired before Starrcade. So, for the incident in England with Arn Anderson and the scissors and the horrendous fight that could have cost Arn Anderson his life. I mean, thank goodness it didn't. And of course, Ric Flair stepped into that role and took the world title from Vader at Starrcade. So Davey Boy was just an excellent wrestler to have along the way as Vader was carving out his world title legacy there. The first time, second time, whatever. Him and Sting traded the belts in Europe too.
So here's another thing that is near and dear to you that I know you absolutely wanted to talk about. I as well want to do the same. You wanted to discuss, as would I, but you have more insight to this than I ever would. It would be the 35th anniversary of the tragic death and passing of the late, great Pat O'Connor, who passed away on the 16th of August at the age of 65. Just a little insight for those of you who don't know who Pat O'Connor is. The New Zealand-born American success story would go on to hold the AWA world title, the NWA world title, and accomplish so much more to the point they named the tag team who's
Memorial
they? The NWA or AWA? Who's they?
The NWA.
Pronouns, pal. God damn it. The NWA would go on to name the tag team title Memorial Cup at Starrcade 1990 in St. Louis, Missouri, after him.
Well, he was big in Missouri. That's for sure. Yeah, so, I mean, Pat O'Connor was a very interesting and incredible talent. He was a great amateur wrestler growing up in New Zealand, and he later trained, of course, to be a pro wrestler. He was actually the very first AWA world champion. It was not Vern Gagne that was the first AWA world champion. It was Pat O'Connor. Now,
interesting.
Yeah, and you know how many title defenses Pat O'Connor wrestled?
Tell us.
0. He never defended the AWA world title, and 9 months in, they stripped him of it and made Vern Gagne the champion. This was all done there was a reason behind it. They were trying to mess with first of all, they seceded from the NWA. That's how the AWA was formed, and even O'Connor was involved later as NWA champion. Well, not later. See, he held both titles simultaneously, which was practically unheard of, right? Because he won his first NWA world title in 1959 by defeating Dick Hutton, a great old school wrestler. Right. And by 60, he still held the NWA title. He held it for 2 years, But during that period, the AWA formed when they seceded. Vern Gagne, Wally Carbo, whoever, seceded and formed the AWA and made him their first champion. But they wanted to mess with the NWA. That's why, see, back then you could do things like that in a way because you didn't have contracts and territorial boundaries were obviously respected. But O'Connor still had his problems with certain promoters like Fred Kohler, who was he loved working for Sam Mushnick, who basically the Starrcade 90 Memorial Tag Team Cup tournament. Sam Mushnick was present in St. Louis, him being the legendary promoter. He was still alive by Starrcade 90, and Mushnick did great business working with O'Connor, but Fred Kohler, who was the promoter in Chicago, wouldn't live up to paying the NWA World Champion to come into his area and have matches, and O'Connor refused to work there. He told the NWA, he said, "Don't book me there. No Chicago stuff." Eventually, they worked out a deal, but Chicago was actually the site of one of the most famous NWA World Title matches of all time in Comiskey Park. I believe it was June 30th, 1961, wrestling's first $1 million gate that we know of by today's dollar standards. They drew about $150,000 in 1961 dollars, which equals over $1 million in today's American currency. And this was also the biggest live crowd in wrestling up until the big event, and Vince McMahon broke that record in 1986 in Toronto's Exhibition Stadium, of course. So over 30,000 fans jammed into Comiskey Park, of course, home of the Cubs. Cubs? Yeah, the Cubs, right? Yes.
Yes. Well, I know. Well, Wrigley. When I went to see a Cubs game, it was
Oh, no,
Wrigley
that's Wrigley.
Field.
Sorry, Comiskey Park is the opposite. The White Sox, the Chicago White
Yes.
Sox.
I don't. I mean, I'm not. It's okay. I don't fault you for that. I'm not quite familiar with baseball and stadiums and all the varietous name changes that have gone on, but that's okay.
Yeah, thank
We
you.
all understand.
All good, all good. Yeah, so the chance to see this was a huge match. Pat O'Connor versus Nature Boy Buddy Rogers, and Rogers took the world title off, and this was billed as the match of the century. 2 out of 3 falls. They each took a fall, and then in the third fall, Rogers got the win over O'Connor, and that world title ended. But his history before that a bit was very interesting too. Pat O'Connor, he was big in Toronto here in Canada, wrestling for the NWA Maple Leaf Wrestling Office, which of course was associated with Frank Tunney and all of those people. I think Billy Red Lyons, all those people we remember. Of course, they went to the WWF when Toronto became a WWF town later. But
Right.
at this point, you had Pat O'Connor teaming up with the Toronto's most famous wrestler and former NWA World Champion Whipper Billy Watson, the late great William Potts. And what was interesting about their reign as the NWA Canadian Open Tag Team Champions, I believe it was that to win the belts, or did they lose the belt? No, sorry, I think they lost the belts to the team of Gene Kiniski, another former NWA champ and great Canadian, and Fritz Von Erich. Gene Kiniski's partner in Toronto was Fritz Von Erich, and they formed a really nasty, heelish, amazing tag team. So Pat O'Connor did a lot of great stuff. As the 60s wore on, he got older, and he still wrestled in the 70s. He came back to the NWA, and his last appearance was he was already retired for sure by this point. He did wrestle also famously in the WWA territory, which was Dick the Bruiser's territory in Indianapolis, Indiana. Won a couple tag team belts there, whatever.
And sorry to cut you off, but if you want to see a real thorough coverage of said territory that you just mentioned,
the WWA.
yes, Jim Cornette at one point did an interview with Baron von Raschke regarding said territory, and they go from beginning, middle to end of what led to the tragic end of said territory in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Yeah, that's the territory where Bobby Heenan cut his teeth. Yeah,
I know Bobby Heenan's been all over the place, but
but
the
that was
ignorant wrestling fan I only really know him from WWF and WCW.
well,
Although
he was.
listening to shoot interviews, I know Bobby's been here, there, and everywhere.
Well, he has, but I mean, his most famous territory before that was the AWA, but in the WWA is really before that, even where he really got his major, start and really honed his craft to become the best at what he did. But anyway, so Pat O'Connor, his last major appearance was the famous Legends Battle Royal at the Meadowlands Arena in East Rutherford, New Jersey, November 16th, 1987, 10 days before the first Survivor Series. This is the infamous Battle Royal where Randy Savage and Lanny Poffo's father, Angelo Poffo, was left off the Pat Patterson. Couldn't get him into the Battle Royal or wouldn't. And, it's more famous for that than the actual Battle Royal at this point.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but Pat O'Connor was there. Lou Thez won the Battle Royal, and I don't think Pat O'Connor was seen much except as a judge in the NWA in 1989. I think he was one of the judges in the Ric Flair Rick Steamboat match at Nashville City Showdown, if I'm not mistaken. And then
Chat, chat. Can you confirm that? If you choose to do so, let us know.
what that?
I'm just asking for people that are actually actively engaging with us to
Okay,
let us know if we're right or wrong, or just to correct or confirm wrestling history. But it
okay,
doesn't look like we have a whole lot going on. I want to send an amazing shout out to our good friend Steve Wilson, aka Steve Rockamaniac. He's always a good guy, always a good person, and he's one of the main reasons that we got our YouTube channel up and running. Now, folks, our YouTube channel is still young, and what's most important is it's one thing, it's really one thing to like and enjoy the content you see on said Facebook page. But if you really want us to succeed and excel to the next level, what you really have to do is like and subscribe our YouTube channel, Triple F Freeform Friday. And I can even send you the link in our comments, whether it be on Facebook or on in the StreamYard chat. So you can all like and subscribe and enjoy the content that we create, because we enjoy doing this. We really do. And without each and every one of you, we cannot get to the next level. And we depend on your love and support, because only each and every one of you can keep us alive. So we are live right now. All right? We're live right now. And now I'm going to send you the link in the StreamYard chat. And if you need it in the Facebook chat, let us know. So this is our YouTube channel. And it doesn't take much. We don't ask much. Just like, subscribe, hit the notification bell anytime we go live. But your love and support and your continued support means the world to each and every one of us.
absolutely. So to wrap up the Pat O'Connor story, I was going to say that in 1990 he was diagnosed with cancer at some point around then, and he died on August 16th, 1990. And of course, the Memorial Cup Tag Team Tournament in December, which was going to be in St. Louis, where him and his close associate Sam Muchnick had achieved a lot of glory, would name the tag team. Well, they said it was the first, but it was the only Pat O'Connor Memorial Tag Team Tournament that I remember. and it was part of Starrcade '90s. So his legacy lived on into the more modern pay-per-view era, and commemorate didn't live a super long life, but he packed a lot of living into that life, whether it was in New Zealand or the United States, and even here in Canada. So rest in peace, the great Pat O'Connor.
Yes, rest in peace indeed, and may your memory be a blessing.
Yeah, and they named the wrestling move after him, the O'Connor rule. Let's not forget that.
Absolutely not. Let us not forget. Um, we're now going to be pivoting to, uh, we're going to not get into our way back machine, but we're going to time travel a year. So we're looking at one of the topics you wanted to discuss goes back to um, summer of 1989. I mean, pivotal summer for me. It was summer before I started school, going to kindergarten. So tells you how old I am. Not that it matters.
You might have
But,
had Dean Douglas.
well, I wish I had Dean Douglas. I had Miss Audrey as my kindergarten teacher. I didn't have Dean Douglas.
Ah, what was Stacy Keebler's character in WCW? Miss Hancock?
Miss Hancock, yes.
Not like Miss Audrey, though.
No, definitely not. So we're going over to August the 20th of 1989, and we're talking about an event that would emanate from the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, Illinois, in which Ricky Steamboat's world title win over Ric Flair had headlined Chi-Town Rumble several months earlier, not seven, excuse me. 3,600 fans filed in for a house show during the Great American Bash Tour. And um, would you like me to go through all the entire results before you give your whole analysis, or shall we
No,
go match by match by match? I don't want to blab and then you have to
yeah.
cut me off and say, oh, I have to say something. Wait a minute, stop.
No, and we don't even have to go through all the matches, but there are a few key points I want to talk about. And one of the things I want to say right off the bat is this was the super interesting period for the NWA because Ted Turner had bought the company the fall before that, and unfortunately allowed George Scott to book the territory into the ground. A lot of, this is the period where Dusty Rhodes had left and Barry Windham had left, and they didn't have the same roster, and the booking was terrible, and they were coming. Things were really sinking, but then, of course, George Scott really stepped in it and was fired after the debacle of Clash of the Champions 6 at the New Orleans Superdome. And then Ric Flair and a booking committee takes over, and Eddie Gilbert, who was a great booker, is part of this committee. And all of a sudden, the summer season lights up with the help of Terry Funk and Ric Flair as headliners, which of course they headline Glory Days, Great Guts and Glory, whatever, Great American Bash '89. And this house show was part of the loop after that, where now in years past they really made a big deal of all these cities having Great American Bash stops. But by '89, it had basically been reduced to the one pay-per-view. And I guess this wasn't totally like part of the Great American Bash wasn't so much a tour, but you still had the matches that were some of them, which were hot at the time, the biggest being Flair versus Funk, which did headline this house show as well. Now, I thought this house show was interesting, too, because it was opened up by well, you talk about the Shockmaster living in wrestling lore. How about the Ding Dongs as a tag team
Well,
opening?
to quote the legendary announcer Jim Ross, well, we'll call that one Ding and the other one Dong, for lack of a better term, who would defeat Al Green and Trent Knight.
Right. Now, Al Green is somebody, I mean, the Ding Dongs, of course, came and went, but without the mask, their careers continued as enhancement talent. And, they were played by Greg Evans and Richard Sartain, which I think were two Georgia independent wrestlers who may have worked NWA TV also. And they may have even been known as the Rock and Roll Rebels, if I recall. They were already teaming up in independent shows and stuff, the regional territories. But Al Green is a very interesting guy. Now, this isn't the Al Green who was the famous soul singer, of course, who later became a preacher.
No, I
No,
don't think so.
no, I know it's
I don't
not.
think
But
so.
and this Al Green is Caucasian. The singer is African American. So I'm 100,000% sure it's not the same guy. No,
Mm,
but
no,
I know a
I
bit.
know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
All right, Al Green, the wrestler, is an interesting guy. Not so much because what he did is Al Green, but some of his later incarnations, when he would be known as half of the Master Blasters with Kevin Nash. For a while after that first guy left, who was Corey something or other, he, after that disastrous Clash of the Champions debut, and nobody knew Kevin Nash at this time, but he was the less bumbling, fumbling of the Master Blasters. And I believe Al Green stepped into the role with the face paint as Kevin Nash's partner for the duration of that rather not so glorious run. But Al Green would later come back as another non glorious tag team member. Do you remember the tag team, the Wrecking Crew, in 1993 in WCW?
Yes, unfortunately. And my father reminded me when he heard Wrecking Crew. My late father, reminded me of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew.
No, not the same. But modeled. The name
Absolutely
was
not.
modeled. No, but the name was modeled after that because that was big in the Mid Atlantic territory. The Wrecking Crew was Rage and Fury, and one of them was Al Green. The other one I want to say was Road Warrior Animal's brother, Mark Laurinaitis, I think. Yeah, who was the Terminator in the late '80s and the least famous of the Laurinaitis, if you will. Uh, we know
I
some of the
didn't
other.
realize there were other Laurinaitis. Wasn't
Yes.
there enough with Joe and John? John is more than enough.
Yeah.
Joe, may you rest in peace. What a rush.
Yes, absolutely. But no, they had a third brother, Mark Laurinaitis, who wrestled as well. He had a few different identities. He was the Terminator in Florida and Jim Crockett, lower level painted. I think he had a painted face. I don't know if the gimmick was really based on the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, but um, later on he would do other roles, and Wrecking Crew was one of them, a lower level tag team. I remember when they had their debut at Clash of the Champions. This was the Clash in early '93 where Chris Benoit had that great match with Brad Armstrong, I think it was. And the Wrecking Crew, I want to say maybe they wrestled Tom Zink and Johnny Gunn, Salvatore Sincere, Tom Brandy. I don't remember who, if Gunn's partner was Zink here, or I don't remember who Gunn's partner was, but the Wrecking Crew was a short lived team that lasted. I think at the end they were basically feuding with the Cole twins, Keith and Kent Cole. You can call one Ding and one Dong, or one Kent and one Keith. I don't know. So I did the whole idea. You know, actually, what it was supposed to be is they brought in the Harris twins, the Bruise Brothers, the Blue Brothers, whatever you want to call them, to
They've
feud.
gone through so many name changes. The Bruise Brothers, the well, not the Blues Brothers. How dare I say that? The Bruise Brothers, the Jacob and Eli Blue, and then you had them as Skull and Eight Ball, and then in TNA you had Ron and Don Harris.
Yeah, well, in WCW they were known as Creative Control, as I recall, in the Vince Russo. The writing of Nitro, briefly they came in late '99 or whatever as Creative Control, which was another stupid idea. But well, I mean, again,
I
another
couldn't tell you because I wasn't watching WCW at that time. I was the poor Mark, the sad ass Mark that watched nothing and only but WWF because WCW was way worse. Even when Vince Russo, Vinny Rubro had the book.
arguably it was even worse than that when Russo had the. No, they could never, like, you just, when you think they couldn't get any worse, they found a way to do so. Basically, I mean, I'm sure Vinny Rubro would argue differently, and he has argued differently, but not just him. I mean, everything was a total mess. But Yeah, so these Bruise Brothers, who also made their name in Portland, like the Equalizer, as well as in Memphis, and the idea with the Cole Twins is that they were going to have the Cole Twins feud with the Harris Brothers because they're two teams of identical twins. Now,
Right.
I don't know anybody who would pay a dime to see that to buy a ticket to see it, but in WCW's infinite booking wisdom at the time, this was the idea. The Bruise Brothers did not last very long, and the Cole twins were probably left fighting Wrecking Crew and whoever was still teaming up. But anyway, this is Al Green we're talking about. And Al Green, of course, lost to the Ding Dongs on this house show when he was teaming with. I already forgot who was he teaming with already. I don't know, whoever it was. So yeah, that was interesting enough. The Ding Dongs and whatever, really weird opening match. The Ding Dongs were one of the most laughable gimmicks in the history of wrestling. There have been many, but that one was certainly special. We don't have to go through all the matches, but this was the point where the Fabulous Freebirds, this at this point composed of Michael P.S. Hayes and gorgeous Jimmy Garvin, uh, had just won the tag team tournament in June over the Midnight Express. And this was a rematch on this show. You had Steve Dr. Death Williams, who went over, I forgot who Williams fought on. Bill Irwin, I think, Wild Bill Irwin.
All right. Well, I have the results right here. So, as per the notes you left me, I know we went through some of them. So, you would have Ron Simmons defeat Brad Anderson, who
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure who that is.
Brad Anderson, yeah, I think he was the yeah, he was a guy that wrestled as an Anderson briefly. Was it? It's not Ole's son, I think. It was. Yeah, he had like a medium career in the '90s. I think didn't really like make much mainstream waves though, like in major TV.
And then you would have Brian Pillman defeating Norman the Lunatic, who would later go on to be Trucker Norm, Friar Ferguson, and Bastion Booger. How do I need to go into more detail? No. Next,
Well,
you
wait
have
a
the
second. Wait a second. Wait a second. Wait a second.
oh there. See, this is the moment. This is the moment where I want to move on and I want to move ahead, but then Alan's got points to get across, and this is where I have to have more active listening or active intelligence to understand what Alan is about to say. So chat us up, and I'll stop talking.
All right. Well, the Brian Pillman Norman the Lunatic matches were basically Pillman's mainstream introduction to a national audience. I mean, some people knew Pillman from Calgary Stampede, but Pillman basically his first major opponent for the first few months was often Norman the Lunatic. Now, I wanted to say that Norman the Lunatic, in addition to Trucker Norm and Friar Ferguson and Bastion Booger, also reprised the Makan Singh character from Calgary. So Brian and Mike Shaw, who played Norman, were well acquainted. And in Global Wrestling Federation, which replaced World Class in Dallas, Mike Shaw reprised the Makan Singh character, which won rave reviews in Calgary. I mean, even Dave Meltzer was tripping over himself in the late 80s with the Karachi Vice stable, including Mike Shaw, Makan Singh, who was probably very underrated, certainly as a character, was much more capable than we would have given him credit for. And it was an odd choice for Brian because Brian was such a high flyer and was really starting to popularize that style, but maybe because they already knew each other, so maybe they'd been in the ring together in Calgary, whatever the reason was. And Norman was also, I believe, along with the Skyscrapers, Teddy Long's first clients as a manager back when you actually had wrestling managers. Teddy Long had just turned heel at Clash of the Champions 6, the one that George Scott pretty much lost his job over. And so Teddy Long began his managerial career with Norman and, of course, with Sid Vicious and the future Waylon Mercy, Dan Spivey, the Skyscraper.
Okay. All right. So that's a bit of a sidebar. And so you have the Steiner brothers defeating Jack Victory and Rip Morgan, the New Zealand militia. And you also talked about Steve Dr. Death Williams defeating Wild Bill Irwin, as well as the new Freebirds, Michael Hayes and Jimmy Garvin defeating Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, the Midnight Express, to retain the NWA tag team titles.
Yeah. I was going to say about the match you mentioned earlier. The Steiner brothers were just starting as a team here. They hadn't really been featured too long together on TV. This was so early on that basically Scott Steiner hadn't even debuted the Frankensteiner yet. This is how far it goes back, that the Steiners, of course, would soon become the absolute hottest team going, and this was the nucleus of the two brothers beginning to work together in the NWA. You know, Rick Steiner had been teaming with Eddie Gilbert in the First Family, managed by Missy Hyatt. That changed. Then Rick Steiner got his brother Scott in, and they did the whole angle where Nancy Sullivan became woman. First, she was Robin Green, pretending to be a nerdy fan at ringside, and Scott Steiner would warn Rick about her, but that was a little bit later. This was the house show loop, and the Steiners were cutting their teeth as a tag team. And I think the New Zealand Militia hardly ever gets mentioned. They would go on to not only wrestle mid-card for a few months, they would actually later change their name and become the Royal Family in WCW. But Rip Morgan started out as the flag bearer of the Sheepherders, who would go on to be the Bushwhackers, and then wrestled solo for a while. And then they had this army gimmick where they would team up as New Zealand Army guys and would come to the ring with boomerangs, known as the New Zealand Militia. Now, Jack Victory was not from New Zealand. He's from New York and had wrestled extensively in Texas and wherever else for World Class.
Well, he also made a lot of indie bookings here in Montreal, here in Quebec in the early 2000s. Yeah.
Okay.
I used to back in the old days when for those of you that are old enough or remember this stuff, Steve Rockamaniac, you remember this because you used to be a part of it. I remember, the days where I used to call 514-790-1212 and used to, at one point, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, get wrestling news. And this was back when In the Ring was up and running. This was the early 2000s. And sometimes it would be Steve, sometimes it would be somebody else like Paul Rossetti, could be Jimmy Fantastic, it could be, those three names come to mind. Those three names come to mind that used to give wrestling news. And they would also try their darndest to talk about a lot of the indie shows that were going on in and around the city of Montreal. And I do remember Jack Victory's name being dropped, not once, but twice, but more than twice.
Oh, well, very interesting, David. Did not know that. I would add that Jack Victory, I believe, had a run in ECW. Him and Paul Heyman went way back to their NWA association, because before Jack Victory teamed with Rip Morgan, when George Scott was still booking, Jack Victory, I believe, was Paul Heyman's bodyguard when he was Paulie Dangerous. In that, right?
Yes.
Right. So, very interesting. But at this point, he became a New Zealander to team him with Rip Morgan. And they weren't bad, but, they were actually feuding with the Dynamic Dudes, the Wonders with the skateboards. Speaking of Laurinaitis and Dean Douglas.
Far out, dude.
Those were barn burners. Yeah, far out, dude. Continue.
So, to conclude, we're going to talk about a couple of matches here. Now, I can go match by match by match unless there are things we have to absolutely talk about before moving on to the next. So we would see Sting defeat the Great Muta by disqualification or DQ, Schmeq, nobody cares, to retain the NWA Television Championship. And Lex Luger would retain the United States title over Wildfire Tommy Rich. And then you would have the Nature Boy, Ric Flair defeat Terry Funk to retain the NWA World Heavyweight title, and the Road Warriors, Hawk and Animal, defeating the Samoan SWAT team, Fatu and Samu, who would later go on to be the head shrinkers in the World Wrestling Federation.
Well, absolutely, and it's just wanted to quickly say that Sting would lose the television title to the Great Muta a few weeks after this. So these were Sting's last few weeks as the prestigious NWA television champion. But those Sting Muta matches were really excellent. The Muta was just off the scale at this period, and really star-studded card when you think of all the names on that show, and and the people who were busting their hump just as mid-carders then, like Tommy Rich and Bill Irwin, and they were never going to achieve their former glory, but they were sure pretty. They were hardworking guys, and you had to really tell. This was really the ascension and the moving away from the early '89 anemic, disjointed, very badly booked shows after Dusty Rhodes and all them had left, and George Scott was booking, and here we have, at least guys like Ric Flair and Eddie Gilbert and Jim Cornette and even Jim Ross, etc., kind of putting this together. And the summer of '89, if you were watching the NWA, it was a pretty exciting summer.
It wasn't the summer of '69, but the summer of '89.
Well, that's it. And the for the NWA, it was the summer of '89. That's what mattered, baby, because from the Double Cross Ranch to the Nature Boys ladies, you had it all.
All right. So I'm glad that we were able to take yet another trip down memory lane. We'll see when we will be back next. I hope to make this a weekly program. We used to do it this way, and we hope to continue doing so depending on our schedules and depending on our availabilities. Now, folks, before we let each other go and before we sign off and end the broadcast, I want to remind you, and I'm doing this as a good favor and a good friend to the community and to the show. So if you haven't heard, or if you've heard, but if you haven't purchased your tickets yet, well, what are you waiting for? So let me remind you, if you haven't heard already, September 20th, 2025, it's going to be Montreal's first ever wrestling convention known as Slamfest. So this is being brought to you by LWA Live Wrestling Auctions, as well as Captain's Corner, who is based out of Massachusetts or the northeastern United States. Now, what can you expect and what can you anticipate? It's as follows. You are going to get 2 appearances by Charles Wright as Papa Shango and the Godfather, respectively. You're going to get local indie talent such as Marco Estrada. You're going to get Carl LeDuc, who is a legend here in the local wrestling business. Of course, he's a member of the famous LeDuc family. He had a wrestling school at one time, and in fact, he even trained a certain person that you and I both know. As well as that, you're going to have legendary enhancement talent and wonderful, phenomenal storyteller Mario Mancini, as well as Paul Roma, who every Sunday drop their Power and Glory podcast. That's not all. You're going to have Barry Windham, the Widowmaker, the Stalker, the legend, the greatest of all time, who comes from a wonderful wrestling family, coming from father of the Blackjacks, brother to, or cousin to, Mike Rotunda, as well as the uncle of Wyndham Rotunda, the late great Bray Wyatt. You have Ray Apollo and Claude Giroux, Doink and Dink. Also, Claude will be making an appearance as Tiger Jackson besides Doink. You will also have indie legend Lufisto, who will be making an appearance. You will also have Mark Canterbury and Dennis Knight, aka the Godwins. Now, Dennis Knight will also be making an additional appearance in the Midian character. And also, nos amis francophones, surtout et certains, Marc Blondin, Michel Le Tourneur, and Richard Charlin, and I believe Pat Laprade is also going to be part of the show as well. But I don't see him on the poster itself. But as far as I remember, until I'm told otherwise, Pat Laprade is scheduled, but if he's not scheduled due to a scheduling conflict, I would like confirmation on that so I don't ill-inform you. And also Bertrand Hébert is also supposed to be there. And I also want to give a shout out and props to Bertrand Hébert, who recently was honored by the Cauliflower Alley Club in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Wow. Amazing.
And before I forget, also, Bronwyn Billington and Bruce Hart will also be at Slamfest. Now, where is this going to emanate from, you ask? Hotel Ruby Foos in Montreal, Quebec. Metro Namur, Namur Metro, 7655 DeCary Boulevard. And if you haven't purchased your tickets already, please go to slamfest.ca, and on this live stream in the StreamYard chat, I am going to post it. Now, should you require further clarification, and if you need further assistance, please reach out to me. But also, please reach out to JF Leduc, Joe McCausey at LWA Live Wrestling Auctions. They will be able to assist you when it comes to purchasing tickets or any questions and concerns or inquiries you may have. And also another shout out to Richard Searing, who is responsible for a group called Collect and Connect, which is all about collecting and connecting. Richard is also responsible for a lot of the custom-made ring garbs that will be and can be available to you at Slamfest, whether it comes to Papa Shango, The Godfather, Doink the Clown, Barry Windham. He's the man you got to thank for it. But he's more than that. Please follow Richard Searing and look up his Facebook page and Instagram page at Collect and Connect. It's that simple. Collect and Connect.
And he's
It
a great
stays in
guy.
your head and never goes away. So on that note, folks, I want to thank you all for being here this evening. And I hope that if you were unable to join during the live broadcast, that you will enjoy this a little bit later on. And we shall be back. We just decide to do this when we do. We should give you more of a heads up if we want to get more viewers, but hey, it's just our kind of thing. So we shall see when we go live next. But rest assured, before Slamfest, we will be right back. And we will be here for you. And thank you as always for joining. And thank you all very much for each and every one of your love and support through thick, thin, and difficult times. Take care of yourselves and each other and love one another. He's Alan Greenberg. I'm David Buchanan. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for tuning in for as long as you were able to. Goodbye. Good night.